So here we are in Illustrator. Last time I showed you the different options of live tracing, right? So if you have a clean enough image, you can bring it in. This is even from a pencil sketch. And the algorithms for the live tracing in Illustrator can help to really kind of smooth things out. But if you're like me, you really want control of everything, right? And so we can control every anchor point here and modify it. And sometimes that's a good way to go, depending on your design, especially if your design has lots of detail. But I started in the last video showing you how you can start showing these, where am I? There we go. How you can start building shapes directly on top of your sketch, right? So right now I have these two circles that I used. Just all I did was use the shape tool and use the pathfinder to kind of cut them out from each other. And then remember, I did stroke and made the stroke bigger. And then I went to object path outline stroke to turn them into filled paths, because a professional logo does not have any strokes active in it. It's all filled paths. It's just a cutout of paper. Now I'm going to show you on a new layer. I'm going to lock this green layer, put a new layer on top of it. So it's going to be layer 4. It's kind of this more purplish blue color. I am going to show you how you can just draw shapes, paint shapes that are nice and clean within Illustrator. There are 3 tools, so we're going to go through them, that I think are the most helpful. None of them are the pen tool, right? So the pen tool is the classic tool in Illustrator. If my logo was all hard edge shapes, the pen tool is great. Notice how you can just draw your anchors, and as long as you kind of connect all the dots, you're just doing straight paths in between the anchors, and it's set to fill. This is the other thing you can do with the pen tool. You can click for the anchor, and then you can click and drag for a curve, click and drag for a curve, click and drag for a curve, click and drag for a curve. But you have to close the path by ending where you began, right? And once you end where you begin, a little circle will appear near your anchor. And you have to be really precise. That's what's tough about Illustrator. You have to click right on your anchor points. It's almost made more for a mouse than for a stylus, right? At least the pen tool is. Now, once you have the anchor points, you can see with the pen tool, with some practice between straights and curves, you could really make any two-dimensional shape you want. But the real key is that once you have the anchor points, you can hold down Command, get to the small selection tool, or what's called the direct selection tool in Illustrator, and you can modify the points. You can modify the curves. You can even move the anchors as long as you click right on them. And if you want a curved path to be straight, you simply drag the anchor, or you drag the handle all the way into the anchor. If you want to change the direction of a curve, you simply swap the handle side from convex to concave, and if I want this then straight, I just drag in the anchor point. But it's fairly technical, right? But logos can be fairly technical. So the pen tool's great. I give you that handout under links, which gives you shortcuts and tips for it. You can delete anchor points just by hovering over them. You can add anchor points by continuing the path, and you close them. And just remember, if you ever hit Command, you'll get to the selection tool, which allows you to, if it's the white arrow, the direct selection tool, allows you to modify individual anchors. So that's the old way of using Illustrator. And some people still prefer it. And if I were making perfect shapes, it would be the way I would do it along with the shape tool. But these are the new tools. These are exciting new tools. First is the blob brush. So you go underneath the shape tool, click on the brush until you get the drawer, and go to the blob brush option. And that's because the standard brush tool, which is an older tool, does brush-like shapes, but does them as strokes. And we don't want that, because you can't modify them as well. We want the blob brush tool. You want to double click it, and you want to be using a tablet, right? This tool is specifically made for the tablet. you want to adjust the size of it to be fairly large. It depends how big your artboard is. I'm going to make it probably about 30 point. Think of them in terms of text sizes. 30 point text is pretty big. And then I want a variation in the pressure, because I'm making it pressure sensitive, to be, almost the whole thing. So it's a 32 point size, 28 point variation. It's pressure sensitive. So when I use it, I don't need to fill up all 32 point, right? If I hit lightly, I'll fill up just a little bit of it. And why it's the blob brush, if I hit command, you'll see that these are full cutout shapes. These are filled paths, not strokes. Okay, so this is how I'm basically going to ink my design. It's one of my favorite tools. If you want something kind of gestural, more brush-like, it's a great tool. This shape is a little big, so I need to adjust it. The other thing that's nice is, like the pencil tool, you can set its fidelity, right? So what does that mean? If I set it all the way to accurate, let's make the size a little bit smaller, which will automatically take my variation down to around 20 point. And that's just because of the line width I'm using here. So I have it set on really accurate right now. So let's paint with it. That captures every little jitter, right? Now let's set it to be more smooth than accurate. I'll just do it all the way. And I'll do the same kind of movement. And I'm wiggling just as much, but look what it did. So this is where you can think of Adobe Illustrator, AI, as being artificial intelligence in a way that Photoshop does not allow. It will automatically smooth for you. This will be nice when you get arthritis, and you're trying to eat peas on a fork. Our hands often jitter when we're trying to ink, when we're trying to make something nice and smooth. So this can take that out for you. But you do have to surrender a little bit of your control of it. So I'm going to set it, my favorite setting is not as smooth as possible, because often that takes away some of the character of the lines I want, and it makes it hard to do these kind of angles. So I do it more smooth than accurate. That's what I do. And I'm going to get rid of these just by holding down command. You don't want to leave what are called errant paths around. And because we're learning, you're bound to make ones that you don't need. So you just select them and you delete. Okay, so let me just start drawing now. I'm going to get a feel for it. And I can stop anytime. The other thing that's great about the blob brush is it will just add on to my path. It won't create a new path, even though I've lifted up. So it's made to be like digital inking. And with a nice delicate touch, I can go thick to thin. And you see how it's smoothing out what I do. That was very helpful there. Makes it look more professional. But still following the path I'm giving it. And this is a pretty new tool. This is only in the last 5 years in Illustrator, this blob brush. So then we can really scrutinize it. And we say, oh, they didn't connect there. So I just used the blob brush to make them connect. Right? And then I can hit Command, and we go to the next tool that's really useful, the pencil tool. And this is where, again, I can click and make it more smooth and accurate. There's no pressure sensitivity here, but I can change this shape to be more what I want. If I want it to hook around and get bulbous like that, I can do it. And then on the inside, you just hold down Command, make sure you can see the anchor points before you modify it. I can modify the inside separate from the outside. That's why we want filled paths and not strokes. Right? So the pencil tool is how I fine-tune. Whoops. But in order for it to be the magic scissors, I have to start through an anchor point, and I have to end through an anchor point. Why is that not picking up? Huh, I am confused. No, this is... So I hold Command until I can see the anchor points, and then I should be able to redraw that path. Yeah, just like that. There's just something about that movement I didn't like. And Illustrator is, in many ways, still a mystery to me. It acts on its own accord sometimes. But these are the tools I find most helpful. Okay, so you notice with the pencil tool, even though I have it set on smooth, like weird things can happen sometimes. And so sometimes if you want it to smooth, I'm kind of searching for my line here. So you see all those little bumps. What if I don't want those? Well, then under the pencil tool in the same drawer is the smooth tool. And once you see the anchor points, this will just kind of even out. It kind of auto adjusts the variations between each anchor point and averages them out across what you hit. So you don't want to overuse it because it makes everything just a perfect curve and it looks artificial, but it can be really helpful. Now, if I want this whole thing to be smoother, I just use the smooth tool, right? And if I want this whole top half to be smoother, I just use the smooth tool and even it out. If I want to redraw it, I use the pencil tool. It just depends how smooth your design is, right? It takes a little work to get sharp angles with the pencil tool, but it is possible. You just have to really mean it when you draw. You get to a point and then you just go right back and you can get sharp edges. Okay, and then the blob brush, of course, I set it to be a little smaller now. We'll just add on to what you already have and change the shape. So it's like magic scissors cutting out of black paper. And then you can see the difference between my sketch, right, and all those little bumps, and that's as clean as I could get it from my scan as a vector to that. And that's going to scale much better. It's going to be much more readable from a distance. So that's the finish I'm going for. So continuing with the blob brush, this is how we will do vector line work for our next project, which is a spot illustration. Remember, you can start and stop. And you can improve on your design. And then when you want to, I wanted more of that leaf to overlap, right? Pull this through. If ever you need to change the color, look here at your defaults, right? I'm doing a black, let's click on it. I'm doing a black fill with no stroke. So sometimes if that black fill becomes a white fill, it will look like you're erasing, but what you're really doing is creating a lot of white paths that then have to be erased. So be mindful of that. It's tricky. That's why I like the blob brush too, because you set your settings and it will remember those settings. So now I need to get into that zen place where I can just draw just like a Sumi brush master. And I'm just using Illustrator to help me stay smooth and even. Now, if it ever feels like it's just getting too thick, I can always shrink it more. But if you shrink your blob brush below 10 point, right now I'm at 10 point, then you're painting with a font that's less than 10 point font, right? And that means that when it's used on a business card, those lines aren't going to be visible. So any detail